Regal Cinema in Evesham. I used to come here as a small boy and watch films with my sister on a Saturday morning. We'd never know how the movie would end. Would the guy get the girl? Would the good guys beat the bad guys? And most importantly, would we get to the end of the film without needing the toilet? Fast forward 30 years and the very survival of the cinema itself was the big story. And no one knew how that was going to end either. Would the cavalry come riding to the rescue? Or would the baddies get their way, tear it down and replace it with a block of undistinguished flats and a gaudy bowling alley? 10 years ago, the BBC's restoration series put the issue of our nation's listed buildings into the public conscience.
How much money are you talking about?
Upwards of £2.5 million.
The programme visited various structures on the Heritage at Risk register, what you might call the critical list. You voted for the buildings that you felt most needed help, and funding groups then gave out millions of pounds in an effort to restore them to their former glory.
Perfect accompaniment to a building like this.
There were more and more winners and losers each time restoration was shown. It really did demonstrate how much we care about what happens to our heritage. Join me, Alistair McGowan, for Restoring England's Heritage as I journey through the West Midlands to see which of this region's historic buildings are being lovingly restored to their original splendour, like the Regal Cinema here in Evesham, and which are on the critical list. We'll be in South Birmingham to see why a former art school is on the Victorian Society's list of top 10 most endangered buildings. It was a beauty. Can it ever be as beautiful again? A 19th century Warwickshire blacksmiths and wheelwrights was derelict and facing disaster. We pop back to Chedham's Yard to see how the 2006 restoration winner spent the prize money. We'll head down the road to the dead centre of Birmingham to see if 13 years of campaigning and fundraising by a committed army of volunteers has succeeded in bringing an old coffin factory back to life. We'll look in on the medieval buildings of King's Norton to see what's happened since the old grammar school and Saracen's Head won the big prize in 2004. I'll take a trip down my own family's memory lane to investigate further delays in the engineering works due to be carried out on the beautiful waiting room at Worcester's Shrub Hill Station. And in Staffordshire, we'll take a tour of a teapot factory, which was already at the top of the critical list before vandals made things worse by stealing the roof. Is there any hope for this pottery's gem? But before all that, I caught up with the person leading the rescue project in the Midlands and asked how the region has fared in its annual Heritage Health Check. So Sarah, what exactly is the critical list?
We call it the Heritage at Risk register, actually.
Oh, do you?
We do, yes. And we publish it every year. And it's not just buildings. It's grade 1 and 2 star listed buildings outside London, scheduled monuments, conservation areas, registered parks and gardens, and battlefields.
And how does the West Midlands compare in terms of A, its heritage, and B, the number of buildings that are on the list?
We've probably got slightly more buildings on the list than some other places. Certainly our average is slightly higher than the national average. But I guess if you were to characterise the type of heritage which is at risk in the West Midlands, then industrial heritage is one of the things which we have a particular issue with because of the decline of the industrial black country and Stoke and the potteries and so forth. These things are completely irreplaceable. They're part of our heritage. They're a very small percentage of the buildings, monuments, landscapes that we have, and they tell our national story. So if we lose them, we've lost that part of that story forever.
But it needn't be the case. That's why I chose to become a patron of my childhood picture house and to play my part in helping to restore it back to its rightful glory and rightful place at the heart of the community. As Jonathan Ross might say, the story of how a classic 1930s thriller became a movie house of horror. In 2003, this place closed its doors, seemingly for the last time. And for the next 6 years, the only people who came in here regularly were vandals. The place, inside and out, had become an eyesore. Then enter the Wiper family. And after investing a huge amount of money, time and love into this building, they turned the local embarrassment into a palace of dreams. Tell us a bit about the state of this building when you took it over.
Sure. It was pretty bad. I mean, there were literal, there were holes in the roof, there was leaks everywhere. Radiators had been left with water in, so they'd all blown up. There was no electricity. Within 5 years, the building would have been a total wreck. It was really, really on its last legs, and it was a consequence of never having any money spent on it for the last 40 years.
You're quite lucky as well, in a sense, though, that this building was built in the 1930s, so you had some beautiful lights and beautiful things to draw out.
Yeah, the building is extraordinarily decorative. These buildings were built up and down the country, but the Regal is even more special in our mind because there are odes to the market town it's built in everywhere. So the beautiful octagonal lights, we've got 5 of them on the ceiling. If you really look at them, they are definitely impressionistic flowers. Evesham is a market town growing flowers. There's friezes running along the walls that show the 4 seasons in bloom. It's an extraordinary amount of detail.
There is an environmental side to all of this, isn't there, really? I mean, even the coat hooks on the top balcony, they were the original ones, weren't they?
Yeah, we went to every length to reuse anything we possibly could, and that was for 2 main reasons. 1, financial savings, and 2, to retain the character of the building and everything that's gone before us as much as humanly possible.
So what do you think is the future now for the Regal? A bright one?
I think it's really bright, yeah. I think we're doing all sorts of things. We're doing films, we're doing alternative content, we're doing live events. It's going really well, and I think that it's going to go stronger as opposed to struggle.
Well, as you can see, the story had a happy ending, and what happened here at the Regal is an important lesson in why restoration matters, why it's such a wonderful recipe, if you like. As Nigel Slater might say, you take something from the past, throw in a little money, add a lot of care, wait for it to rise, and hopefully you've created something tasty that will keep people happy for generations to come. Keeping our heritage alive can be an uphill struggle. A former art school has been on the register since 1982, and I wondered whether those championing its cause had ever given up hope.
Walsall Heath is an ordinary Birmingham suburb with an extraordinary number of listed buildings. On the Moseley Road alone, there are 16 of them, and they're known collectively as the String of Pearls. One particular gem is the former Moseley School of Art, designed by Midlands architect W.H. Bidlake. But for the past 25 years, it's been home to Moseley's Muslim Community Association, and the years have not been kind to the place.
I met with a custodian here, who told me about the realities of taking on a listed building in need of restoration, and how he had inherited a building in truly dire straits.
When we took the building over from the City Council, it was in a disastrous state. Water was just flooding in, the basement was totally flooded, and obviously that created tremendous problems. So when we started working on the roof, refurbishing the roof was a big task. It is a Grade 2-star listed building, and of course the slate had to come from a particular quarry in Wales, and of course that certainly hit us quite badly. We got the building watertight, we started repairing the inside, and once the heating had been operational for a while, the building started drying up, and of course we suddenly found that there was a huge outbreak of dry rot, and dry rot traveled like wildfire. We set up a community organization, and it's used as a community center. So we have a number of activities going on here, really. We have children's activities, youth activities, scouts groups, women's activities. We have an elderly group getting together here as well. We have to recognize that this is perhaps one of the most deprived areas in Birmingham, if not in the Midlands. And of course we want to try and provide facilities in the local area for the local community, which they can afford and feel more comfortable going to. There is a lot going for us, really, but we need help.
It's wonderful what you've done here, but were there times where you were tempted to just walk away?
Well, of course, with some members, obviously, that thought has certainly been there. We are totally committed, and we want to make sure that this is an excellent building, and we want to go ahead, and we're very positive, really.
It is a glorious building, so with your passion and a bit of help, I hope you get there.
Thank you very much. Yes, we're looking forward to that.
Yes.
It's a big challenge, obviously, but we hope we can do it.
Yeah, I'm sure you can.
Well, it seems that help is at hand. The Moseley Muslim Association is now working closely with English Heritage and other agencies, trying to raise the funds which will enable them to continue their good work on the building. I really hope they succeed. I grew up here in Worcestershire, and although sadly I never met him, my grandfather was a train guard on our local line out of Honeybourne, so he would have taken many a train through this station, Worcester Shrub Hill. As a teenager, I used to change trains here myself on the way through to Birmingham to see football matches, and whenever I came through, I always noticed this ornate, if rather oddly situated, waiting room on platform 2A. And when I noticed it was on the critical list, I wanted to find out why. The outside may look striking, but the inside, to put it mildly, disappoints. It certainly couldn't be used, and that's a pity, because this waiting room is something of an original, with a heritage the whole country can be proud of.
Its national significance, and probably the reason that it's on the Buildings at Risk register, is the fact that there aren't any examples similar to this of a complete facade with tiles and cast iron, but this is the one sort of unique example of it in this country.
And is it well loved by the people of Worcester?
I think the people of Worcester do love it, and they want to see it brought back into use.
And that has been taking place, that process?
Yeah, the restoration of the exterior was carried out about 2 or 3 years ago, and works were done to underpin the southern end of the building where it's been moving. That was all completed, but unfortunately there were problems internally, had some technical problems because of water ingress over the years, and that has had to sort of wait while the work has been done to put together the correct procedures and specifications for that. But I know that Network Rail are moving forward with a contract for that, and they'll be doing work in the new year.
And if this work wasn't being done or hadn't been started, what would have happened to this thing?
It would sit and not move anywhere, because a building's only viable if it has life, and it preserves itself and pays its way by having a use and having life.
The construction was originally built as a display piece, showcasing the skills of the local workforce. Then it was transported here to use as a ladies' waiting room. Now, however, it's only really used by the local pigeons. If campaigners keep on track with the work, that wait could soon be over. A complete building recovery is hoped for by 2014, when the people of Worcester will once again be able to wait in grandeur on platform 2A.
The BBC's restoration project has been running since 2003, offering grants to one winning building every year. So let's take a look now at some of this region's winners. Firstly, Chedham's Yard near Stratford-on-Avon, which you may remember scooped the big prize in 2006. But was the money enough to stop them from going under?
This yard in Wellesbourne was owned and run by 5 generations of the Chedham family, until Bill Chedham was finally forced to shut up shop in 1965. Restoring the yard has been a real labour of love.
We opened in June 2012, and this has been our 2nd season. When we won restoration in 2006, we won the right to apply for £1 million. A lot of people think that we actually were given a cheque, but we weren't. We had to apply for it, and so each way along in those 5 or 6 years we had to ask for the money. We've had over 5,000 artefacts that we've had to clean, that we've had to catalogue, we've had to number and photograph and try to put back in exactly the same place as they came from, and that's been a hard job, but without the friends and the volunteers we wouldn't have succeeded. The restoration work has been done to such a standard that when people look at it, they can't even see that it's been done. And what we want people to come in and say is, well, what have you been doing? What did you spend the money on? And that's what we want to hear.
The grand opening played host to a special guest, the man who had reluctantly had to close the yard almost 50 years before.
In 2012, Bill Cheddon was not a well man, and he had been in hospital for quite a while. But we did get permission to get him out of hospital on the day we opened, for him to be here to see it all happen. And he really was quite bemused by the fact that people were so interested in the place that he had worked in all his life. But he was really thrilled to see it, and we were thrilled with the fact that he was able to come and see it finished.
Sadly, Bill passed away later that year. But thanks to the commitment of Heather and the team, his legacy will live on for generations to come.
We go back to 2004 now, and a winner from Frank Skinner's Birmingham.
The old grammar school and the Saracen's Head in Kings Norton were part of the largest collection of medieval rooms in the city. But back in 2004, neglect and decay had really taken their toll, and the buildings were genuinely at risk.
Let's see how they look now, Frank.
Well, much has changed, even the name. It's now known as St Nicholas Place, and the canon says that's not all that has altered.
From the opening in 2008, we've had a collection of medieval buildings with modern extensions which are warm, bright, lively, accessible, useful and vigorously used. We've also, because we opened in the middle of an economic crisis, had to change business plans, expectations, hopes, and what we do day to day to secure the future of the buildings and their continued use. We've always been committed to St Nicholas Place being genuinely accessible to all, and because Kings Norton is a place with some pockets of affluence but huge amounts of deprivation, we've always rested on the history of the church and of the green area at the heart where St Nicholas Place is to draw in and be a focus for people wherever they live and whatever they do. So we've had to work very radically, very hard on ensuring that inclusion isn't just a lip service word, it's a reality.
And if you're thinking of championing a building in your area, Rob has this advice.
Look to the story you want to tell, you want to hand on, what you want to make viable and useful and alive. Because buildings like this, in an area like this of multiple deprivation, can make a huge difference. We underestimate the significance of the story of the buildings in the lives of people and how we can draw others into that story. And also, be prepared to work with whoever is a friend. These buildings don't belong to us. They belong to people who built them hundreds of years ago. They belong to those who come after us.
And that is the very essence of why it is essential that we do our utmost to preserve our heritage. Our final update comes from a factory which 14 years ago was laid to rest when staff were forced to close the doors for the last time. Let's see if they've managed to resurrect the place.
Here in Birmingham's historic jewellery quarter is the Newman Brothers Coffin Works. Their fittings adorn the coffins of, among others, Winston Churchill, the Queen Mother and Princess Diana before the factory closed in 1999. This place was runner-up in the first restoration series back in 2003, and since then conservationists have been campaigning to bring this incredible building back from the dead. So tell me, what stage are we at the moment on this site?
Well, as you can see from the way we've all had to dress today, this is an active building site, and it's in the possession of the contractors, and will eventually hand it back to us. It's taken us ages to get here. That's the real point. I mean, 10 years is obviously the last film, and 10 years of up and down battle, triumphs and disasters. But eventually, the really exciting moment was when the contractors, FWA, came in and got started. It was just, we didn't ever feel we'd actually get to that point at times. Yeah. So it's been a real triumph for the trust.
What made you care so much about this place? What's your personal connection with it?
It's one of those buildings that's made extraordinary, an ordinary building made extraordinary by the passage of time. You touching real lives, it's that sort of connection, and that's what appeals to me about it.
So it's not just the unusualness of what happened here, what was made here.
Well, that does add to it. I mean, let's be honest. You know, making coffin fittings and coffins, and of course kids love them. We all love it. It's a bit woo ghoulish, but it's the way that it represents a business. It's self-contained. It's all very Birmingham. All little different workshops doing different tasks. The wonderful machinery, the ins and outs of the details of places. That's what I like, and the character of it. It just oozes character. By cleaning up a building, by repairing it, you've got a chance of just losing all those little bits that you've got the character. And the real scare is when we put it all back and try and put it all back as it was, bring the things in, that somehow that mystery thing, the character of it might be lost. We're working very hard not to let that happen. It's going to benefit the people of Birmingham as being an important part of Birmingham's industrial heritage preserved, because that's what industry and Birmingham are synonymous with each other. The idea is you step back in time and you go around and you see the factory as it was and experience the lives and the stories of the people who worked here.
But Simon knows this is about much more than just bringing a place back to life. It's about ensuring it lives on well into the future. And to do that, what you need above all is a strategy.
You can spend a fortune repairing a building and bringing it back. If you haven't got a plan to see how that old building is going to last, how you're going to maintain it into the future, the buzzword everybody's got nowadays, sustainability, if you haven't got that sorted, you might as well not bother. What we've done is mix a heritage attractors, Newman Brothers, that will come back in, but that'll generate some funding, with alternative sort of funding by letting out part of the old factory as units. We're looking at heritage businesses and creative businesses, and that mix of funding to make the project work, make the building work into the future as far as we can go.
My last port of call was Staffordshire, and a building that has declined to such an extent that I worry it could be beyond salvation. In the 19th century, the Price and Kensington teapot factory in Longport was the heartbeat of the community. Today, that heart has long since stopped beating, and the lifeblood has been drained from the whole area.
The West Midlands was once known as the workshop of the world, and Stoke-on-Trent was the beating heart of its ceramics industry. But today, the glaze has gone, and this part of Staffordshire paints a very different picture. Once proud industrial buildings like this are now right at the top of the critical list. Let's have a look inside.
I met up with a man whose links to this place span several decades. He shared his memories of its past and his hopes for its future.
So Phil, you used to work here, didn't you, in your youth?
Yeah.
What was it like, Price and Kensington, when it was thriving?
Very, very busy. Lots and lots of people worked here, about 3,000.
3,000?
Mm.
Yeah. So what's your role here now then?
Caretaker. I've been caretaker for this place now for 14 years.
And that's a paid job you're at?
No, I don't get paid.
Ah.
I don't get a penny. There's about 8 of us. One's a bricklayer, one's a joiner, and we all volunteer. We work here, patching things up. We have done for years. We've never had a penny off no one.
Mm. So that you're doing this on a voluntary basis?
Yeah.
Why? What made you do that?
Because I like the place. My wife worked here, her mother worked here. A lot of my relatives worked here. I just like the place.
Because how would you describe it now in terms of its state of disrepair?
Oh, it's all collapsing. I've patched up here, patched up there. I can't put boards up against the windows, I'm not allowed. It's really, with it being a listed grade 2 star, we can't do anything. You can't do nothing to the place.
So what would you like to see happen here? What?
I'd like to see it all to be restored.
And when you say restored, I mean obviously it couldn't become a teapot factory again, could it, or could it?
It could be, yeah. It could be, but it could be restored and it could be rented out as units.
Do you think it would make a good museum? Should it be reopened and...
Yes, it would.
As a tourist attraction?
Yeah, it would make a very good tourist attraction. We do get people calling here, where I've had people from Canada, America, where they found out the families used to work here and could they walk around. This is one of the oldest pot banks in Staffordshire. You'd lose a lot of history, a lot.
Phil and his committed band of brothers desperately want to save this site. But are they simply holding back the tide? One local group has joined the fight.
The Potteries Heritage Society was set up a preservation trust that took the lease of 10 bottle ovens and then and got some restoration funds for that, so about £600,000. This was one of the bottle ovens that was protected through that scheme. Potteries Heritage Society has been around for nearly 25 years now, and we've been looking out for other buildings around Stoke-on-Trent, particularly trying to make sure that buildings are kept in use.
But this building has not been used, and I wonder if it ever will be again. It wasn't built with 21st century standards in mind. Could well-meaning bureaucracy actually get in the way of its survival?
Do you think the listing is actually helping preserve the building, or is it hindering it?
Well, again, we're talking about uses, and buildings have to be used to survive, so adaptation has to happen. So this would probably be built with lots of external staircases, with no lifts, with no disabled access. We have to build those things in order to make it survive.
So if this building were to be razed to the ground, or even just to fall into the ground, as looks quite likely, what would we lose?
I think the danger is we would lose an identity that we have here in the potteries, really. That's 250 years of history. We're a city of 6 towns, and each town has its own charm, and the places in between. We have a great situation here where we're on the canal. It's a place where we get visitors, thousands of visitors that either come past or stop here and are interested in this sort of heritage. So I think there's a great opportunity there, as well as an issue and a problem.
So you think there's hope for Phil and his team of volunteers?
Absolutely. It's about making sure that the new uses are appropriate, but also just making sure that that people use them, appreciate them for what they are.
Restoration isn't just about putting things back the way they were, nice though that would be. For buildings like this to have a proper future, we need to find new ways of using them. But first, they have to hope that someone cares enough to try to save them. And if we don't care, well, we run the risk of losing yet another link with our regions and our nation's past. By getting involved with time, energy or money, you could help make sure that structures like these continue to tell their tales for generations to come.